if the machine is learning from all of the internet, and I don't know how you program it to only get the smart stuff, right? I don't
Yeah.
think you can do that. It learns from everything, and therefore it learns misinformation. And some of these examples that people came out with were funny, but they were also scary for an industry that is bringing in tens of billions of dollars. And like you just said, if they can't be profitable, whether because it just costs too much or because people realize this stuff is absolutely flawed, then
Yeah.
what happens down the line to an NVIDIA? Because these companies can't make money after giving NVIDIA all that money for their chips. So there's a whole line of things that have to work out for the NVIDIAs of the world to keep going.
Hey, Scott, how are you?
I'm well. I'm well. How are you doing?
It's one of those weeks I'm glad I'm not in the stock market.
Yeah, it's not for the faint of heart. It never has been. We always warn people about this, and then weeks like this happen to prove it. Yes.
Yeah, so many of our episodes, we really are on technology and products and companies. And lately, we've been doing an awful lot of big finance, macroeconomic stuff, but there's no escaping it. Partly because tech companies have such a presence on the market nowadays.
Right. I mean, when there was a big tech boom, often it happens to get attention because of all the money that pours in. And so we here in Silicon Valley knew about the dot-com boom or the social media boom or certainly AI. The world knows about it because all those people are getting wealthy or watching their stock prices tumble. But it just, all these eyeballs come onto the Silicon Valley via Wall Street, or
Yeah,
maybe more accurately, Wall Street via Silicon Valley.
exactly. Well, this week, the Dow lost 1,000 points in 3 days. And uh, certain companies drove it, they say. I mean, the big one is Salesforce. I mean, Salesforce is gilt edge company. They always do great, and yet they announced it's not going to be a good year for them. And the moment they did that, their stock fell 20% and apparently dragged the markets down with it.
Yeah, Salesforce is on the Dow, and think about how just absolutely perfectly priced Salesforce was. And so anything short of perfection is going to drive this stock down. And that goes for a lot of the software and certainly AI companies that we've seen. The expectation is for absolutely flawless execution. So even if you beat on, say, a top or a bottom line during your earning report, which they come every quarter. I mean, every 3 months, it's tough to be a long-term investor in this environment. But you also have to look out into the future and say that is going to be perfect too, and that is really difficult to do.
Yeah, the Dow fell, well, with a 40,000 Dow, a drop of $1,000 isn't that much. I mean, it fell 350 on Wednesday, and that's only 0.9% of the value of the market. And then it fell on Thursday, 0.6%. So, we're only looking at 1.5% Dow drop in the Dow. That's a drop in the bucket compared to the overall value of this run up of the last year. But still, it gets your attention. And there's another factor that I thought was interesting. One analyst said this marks the moment when NVIDIA can no longer hold up the markets. It can't buoy them up. I mean, I remember in 2000, Intel was the last company really doing well during the dot-com bubble burst. And and Intel's numbers would come in and it would save the market. I mean, the market would be way down and Intel's numbers would come in and it would come back up. And it kept the market alive for, I don't know, almost a year. And then Intel couldn't do it anymore and the market crashed. Um, it seems like that's what's going on with NVIDIA right now. I mean, they've had incredible numbers and they just had incredible numbers and they apparently held up the market for a couple days, but they just couldn't sustain it.
Yeah, but I mean, also Nvidia's earnings came in and held up the market or boosted the market. But then you get software companies like Salesforce. They're in a different business. They're also priced to perfection, but they're in a different business. Dell is in a different business. So when these companies come in, and again, they had decent numbers, but the forecast is still a little cloudy, which is
Yeah.
understandable. And stock investors said it is time to take some profits. And in the case of Salesforce, that's a 20% haircut. That was a deep, deep taking of profits.
Yeah.
But you really can't look at NVIDIA or anything going on with that company and say, well, this should affect how a Salesforce or even a Dell performs. You know, all those chips to power AI that the likes of Elon Musk and everybody else is buying, that money goes to NVIDIA. It doesn't go to Salesforce. And so it's just a different market entirely. And it makes sense that these different companies are being treated differently.
Yeah, but I think there's also a general wariness out there. I mean, the next inflation numbers come out today, Friday. And on top of that, the GNP growth got adjusted down. So the year isn't looking as great. There seems to be a disconnect between the markets right now and the reality of the economy. And I keep seeing more and more analysts on the internet and print and everything else saying commercial real estate is really down, and residential home building is really down. And there seems to be a mix. No one can read the tea leaves properly right now. And I think the market's really wary that a little bit of bad news like Salesforce can cause a major reaction.
And that makes sense. So much money has been going into equities because wealthy people are looking at, the stock market as an opportunity for growth. And much like crypto speculators are looking at Bitcoin as an opportunity for growth. And it has been, despite many of us saying, hey, that's really risky. But look, anytime the Dow, not to mention an individual stock, gets to all-time highs,
yeah,
that's an all-time high for a reason. And when it says, hey, we're actually dialing back either our future guests or our current revenues, the stock price falls for a reason. And it all sort of makes sense. And I think that any company right now looking ahead and saying, gosh, we just don't know exactly where inflation is going to fit in. We don't know where housing prices are going to fit in. The job numbers have been high for a long time. We don't know where that goes. We're in an election year. And so we could have, a different party in office. All these things are not all that far away. And so it makes sense for any company to say, the future is a little bit cloudy. We're going to take it day by day. And so any investor who's in it for the short term, goodness, good luck with that.
Good luck with that. Most surveys suggest that the most important thing in people's average citizens, voters' minds is the economy. I mean, is that another reason why everybody's really wary and watching all this? Because the state of the economy in November could decide the presidential election, given the polls out there.
Right. And, the sort of surprising polls that show so many people saying, gosh, the economy is bad when the economy is really, really strong. And so that shows me that it could go down to the wire in terms of how people really feel on their way to the polls that the economy is doing. And there is still time for their personal fortunes to drop or the value of their house to drop or even, heaven forbid, their job loss, them to lose their jobs. And so any of these things.
It could come down on that Tuesday morning to the price of gas and the price of groceries.
Right. And I think you're right in that the economy takes maybe a larger than it should, role in the election, but it really does. And we saw, Clinton, it's the economy stupid. And so many campaigns really ride in or ride out of DC based on how the economy is doing or based on how people perceive the economy is doing.
Now, if NVIDIA can't still hold up the market, it can still raise its value. One of the ranking firms just named it a strong buy, even after all that it's accomplished in the last year and that incredible stock price, it's still ranked as a #1 strong buy.
There are some tailwinds even for NVIDIA. It's hard to imagine, but people are ramping up the AI purchases. And NVIDIA is still the place where they're doing most of their buying because the other companies just haven't caught up. There was some speculation around their 10-for-1 stock split that they announced when they came out with earnings, that is a move to try to get into the Dow 30.
Yeah.
And, why
Well,
not? I mean,
apparently it provoked an actual increase in purchases of stock shares. I mean, people got excited about it because they could finally play on that playground.
well, right, they're not there yet, but if they do get in, all those funds that buy Dow stocks would have to buy Nvidia as well. And so it's not a sure thing, but this is a really, really well-run company. And there's no indication that it won't be well run in the foreseeable future. But yeah, I mean, goodness, a nearly 3 trillion, by the time anyone's hearing this, it may be a $3 trillion market cap, is awfully high, and it got there awfully fast. So much like I would say for Salesforce, a sudden tumble doesn't mean it's a bad company or a badly run company. It's just there's so much money in there, and people are waiting for any excuse to take a profit because they need to pay off something, right? I mean, they need that money for some reason.
Now, I certainly wouldn't do any investment advice based on Jim Cramer. He's been wrong at least as often as he's been correct, but he's predicting Nvidia is going to be more valuable than Microsoft. So,
Well, right. I mean, I've heard that from a number of people because Microsoft right now is number one, Nvidia is number three, closing in on Apple, who's number two. And it is just, I mean, points away in terms of stock dollar values that these guys are separated. So it is easy to imagine Nvidia becoming the most valuable company. But then again, there are profit takers lurking around every corner, and a whole lot of them must be looking at Nvidia. I mean, think of those employees, think of the long-term investors who have just seen their value skyrocket. And some of them have to be saying, I can really take care of a lot of financial things right now if I just sell some stock. And that makes sense too. So who knows where
yeah,
it
I don't
goes.
have to work the rest of my life. I can either be loyal to this investment or I can retire.
Right,
That's a
right.
fairly easy decision. Now, I would be very interested in seeing, I don't know if they report it, but to see design ins numbers for NVIDIA,
The
because there
what's
is design ins where you're designing their chip into your product.
hmm.
Because design wins actually are kind of a canary in the coal mine, because one of the fears about NVIDIA is not that they're not doing great and doing a brilliant job, but those customers out there aren't making a lot of money right now. And it's interesting to see if the number of new products that feature AI slows down. That would be the
Yeah,
one thing that could hurt NVIDIA right now.
right. I mean, if you think of the last couple of weeks, the headlines have been, for the most part, really strong for AI. Look at OpenAI's new models, and Google came out with this, and NVIDIA's stock price did that. But I mean, especially Google Gemini just embarrassed the heck out of AI and machine learning. For the
Yeah.
second time in just a few months, it
Right.
came out with results that were drastically wrong, telling people to eat rocks and put glue in their food
Yeah.
because these are headlines that were in, let's say, The Onion. And again, these machines that scrape the internet, and I've said this until I blew in the face, take everything, the good advice and the bad advice. And so it all goes out there. And this is why we have to realize AI is flawed. And the statement AI is flawed is, at this point, I think, just scratching the surface
Yeah.
of what
I
could go
think I
wrong.
think Google said this week those are problems they can't really fix.
Right. Because if the machine is learning from all of the internet, and I don't know how you program it to only get the smart stuff, right? I don't
Yeah.
think you can do that. It learns from everything, and therefore it learns misinformation. And some of these examples that people came out with were funny, but they were also scary for an industry that is bringing in tens of billions of dollars. And like you just said, if they can't be profitable, whether because it just costs too much or because people realize this stuff is absolutely flawed, then
Yeah.
what happens down the line to an NVIDIA? Because these companies can't make money after giving NVIDIA all that money for their chips. So there's a whole line of things that have to work out for the NVIDIAs of the world to keep going.
Well, and I think there's another news item this week related to that, that the United States is going to slow AI chip exports to the Middle East by NVIDIA chips and AMD chips. And the reason is they're worried about the technology getting diverted to China. Yeah, you
Right.
don't see the Middle East using a lot of AI chips right now, but they could make a lot of money passing that intellectual property through to China.
Right. China it's interesting, is going to be, I think, a big issue in the campaign, just like it was back in 2016. And these chip companies may suffer from the American candidates running over each other to try to put in tariffs.
Yeah.
And these laws that say, hey, we've got to ban this social media company because it's owned by a Chinese company, or we've got to keep these chips from not only China, but from the Middle East market, which is a fast growing tech market. And NVIDIA stock on the day when that news came out dropped about $40. And granted, it was already down, and that's not a huge move for NVIDIA anymore, but it's still indicative of the concern that investors should have because of our sort of business Cold War relationship with China.
And tariffs are bad enough, but getting a government export X rating to certain countries that's final. You can go to jail for that one if you violate it. Okay, we're constantly watching the 30-year fixed rate mortgage because houses are already unaffordable again around here. They've regained all they lost for about 6 months, and now they're higher than ever. Well, the fixed mortgage rate climbed past 7% again. It was 6.94, and now it's 7.03. It's crossed that 7% barrier. Do you think it'll have any effect on housing sales? I mean, I get those housing real estate flyers, and it's like houses put up on the market for 2.7 million and they sell for 3.2 million, which means there was a bidding battle for every single house in this valley.
Right. I talked to a lot of real estate agents, and they are once again seeing the overbidding, and because there's just not enough inventory, even as during the spring season, more people put their houses on the market. There is enough money around here, and I'm sitting here in Silicon Valley right now. There is enough money around here where there are multiple buyers for each house. The average home price in Santa Clara County, which is, dead center of Silicon Valley, recently hit $2 million. That's the median home price. There's a lot higher, there's some lower, but that's a staggering figure, which means the down payment is going to be somewhere around $400,000. Imagine you're a young couple trying to start out and build your life here. Who has a down payment of $400,000 that is not?
I was going to say, how many hamburgers do you have to eat to save enough money to put up that kind of a down payment?
Right. It's a different thing than just a lifestyle of cutting back a little bit. What you have to have, I think, and this is what the agents tell me, is a whole lot of stock option money that is available, it's liquid, that you can put in for a down payment. And that really changes the game unless you're a successful techie. And so that really hits hard. And then on top of that, young couple that just managed to somehow put that much cash together, the rest will have to be paid with a 7% mortgage, which is a whole lot given the prices of how homes around.
You're going to pay $5 million total by the time you get done those 30 years?
It depends. But right, just the monthly payments are super, super high.
Yeah.
And it's why a whole lot of people who are not successful techies have said, I'm going to rent for the foreseeable future. And that is where they are putting their money right now.
Yeah, that makes it even harder though to save money when you're paying rent every month.
Right.
Okay. Elon Musk isn't happy. Did you read that CalPERS, the California Public Employee Retirement System, which I guess is like the largest pension fund in America. So when they move money around, it impacts everybody. Well, they just came out against the proposal to pay Elon Musk his $56 billion for his work as Tesla's CEO. And Elon replied that, what do you say? CalPERS broke the deal. Shame on them. They have no honor. It's hard to be sympathetic with a guy that wants to get paid $56 billion.
Right. But look at it this way.
If it was SpaceX and he managed to get guys on Mars already, $56 billion, I'd contribute to that just because of what he did. But for Tesla, for being a CEO?
Well, for being a CEO who had a really generous and large stock package and for having that stock just go up and up and up. And I think that's what sort of the line from your Tesla and Elon Musk fans is, hey, by now that's what it's worth because that's how much the stock gained. And I think they expected a lot of the investors, including those who have big funds like CalPERS, to sort of fall in line just because, hey, we all made money. The CEO should make that much money. I'll be interested to see where the vote finally comes down because often, as we've seen at these shareholder meetings, when the company has done really well and the shareholders are very strongly rewarded, they will vote for what the CEO or the board wants because they want to keep that train going. The Musk thing is controversial because it was rejected once and it is enormous. But I don't know that will keep a whole lot of people away. But CalPERS is a pretty major shareholder and they have some say in this, no doubt.
Now, I assume there was a performance clause in Elon's deal, right? The stock had to reach a certain point or the company revenues. I mean, like baseball, you're going to get $200 million a year, but you got to hit 275 and 30 home runs.
Right. And I think Musk hit the goals to get that money. But I believe in Delaware, they said, it was just done somehow wrong. And so they had to revote. And now it's up there. And again, the number is enormous. And I don't know that anyone deserves that, no matter how successful that is, successful he or she is. But again, I'm not a shareholder. I don't have a dog in this hunt either way. I am curious how this goes and what it may mean for future pay packages. But other than that, I mean, I'm just sitting back with, my bag of popcorn like everybody else.
Yeah. So the Delaware court, as we know, Chancery Court, didn't accept it. And now I guess proxy advisor, Glass Lewis's recommendation, I guess that's a firm that advises on proxy votes. And they recommended last week that Tesla shareholders vote against. And I think that provoked CalPERS. So here we go. It's going
right. Here we go.
Yeah. Break out the popcorn, get butter and salt. Here we go. Okay. Little item. Amazon is making Grubhub food delivery now a permanent fixture of Amazon Prime. They've been kind of doing it, but now it's a real deal. What do you think? Food delivery now?
Sure. Why not? That seems to be a hot topic. It's a business that really turned things around and perhaps saved Uber during the pandemic. And I think we have, as a society, gotten used to it. So if you're Amazon and you're delivering everything else, why not? I think the
food take priority. It's like we got a stroller, we got a box of books, and we have a pizza. Do you go to the pizza delivery first while it's still hot?
That's a good question because I would say, well, certainly the food should be faster, but with Amazon, they're bringing their necks trying to get stuff fast. But I would say, food should be the priority. But look, I mean, think of all the companies that are doing really well. DoorDash, Instacart. I mean, there's so many delivery services, both here and globally. Are they all going to survive and thrive, or are some of them going to get bought up? Certainly, what Uber did was a good move to get one. Amazon can buy one. Everybody kind of wins if there's competition, but also a big company backing your business, right?
Well, this is the standard industry maturation cycle. The little companies pioneer it. They get bought up by the big ones, and the big ones finally shake out to one real big one and one second place, one Avis company.
Right. And I think that there may be a big one. Let's say it's Uber Eats or Amazon because they're big. But there will still be room for the DoorDashes and the other ones as well. And that's, again, very healthy to a society that's really gotten used to putting these guys to work.
We don't want to go out. Yeah.
Right.
Whenever I go on a walk with my youngest son and we see a car parked on the wrong side of the street at an angle, he goes, DoorDash.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Finally, congratulations to Nolan Bushnell and Al Alcorn. We talked about Nolan last week regards to Pizza Time Theater, but his claim to glory is Atari. and the invention of the video game. And the guy that did it with them was Al Alcorn. In fact, it was Al Alcorn that went over to the Handicaps pub when the manager called and said, your machine isn't working. And he saw the cardboard box full of money and realized he had a winner on his hand, and went back to Nolan. Nolan began this company, Atari. He began it in one of his daughter's bedrooms. He moved one of them out to the other bedroom and took over the bedroom and used the skills he had learned going, I think he was going to Brigham Young or University of Utah, playing games on giant computers, but he was also working as a carny, doing games on the midway of a carnival. And he combined the two and created, well, it was actually, I believe it was originally Space Invaders, but it became Pong. Pong was the winner. And I actually played Pong in the Handicaps pub just a year or so later. So I was there at the beginning, and now I watch my kids play these extraordinary games. And it's $1 trillion industry. So they've just been named as 2024 Fellows of the Computer History Museum, which is basically the Hall of Fame of computation. So congratulations, gentlemen. You changed the world, and now you're going to be recognized for it.
Good for them. Good for them. Well deserved.
Your kids ever play games, computer games?
Yeah.
It's kind of a guy thing.
No, it's not a guy thing, but they didn't get into it quite as much. We didn't have the gaming systems in our house on purpose.
Yeah.
And so that saved some of that. But, you know, a little bit of that I've always been a fan of, because I've interviewed enough executives who said, hey, I got my start by being curious about games and how they worked. And then they ended up, you know, later in life, let's say, developing an iPhone app, and, you know, success happens.
Well, my sons they played early on, then they didn't play for a decade. And then all of a sudden, about 3 weeks ago, they found an old copy of Halo. And yeah, my oldest son comes over and plays against my younger sons. And my wife and I have moved out of that room, watching mass slaughter, for an hour and a half. We're a little tired of that. So
just like Nolan Bushnell moved somebody out, your son has moved you and your wife out. So there you go.
Exactly. It all goes full circle. Okay, that's it for now, folks. You can find us on Spotify, Anchor, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube, as you all know. You can see Scott on Facebook and X, and of course, almost every weeknight on NBC Bay Area, and me regularly on the BBC World Radio show Business Matters. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.